Good morning and welcome to the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting of August 5th, 2020. Let the record show, with the exception of Commissioner Elton Langford, who is at home recovering from, I guess he's quarantined actually right now. All the other commissioners are present. If you wish, please rise for the invocation delivered this morning by our attorney, Doug Manson.
Father God, we come before you this morning. We ask you to bless this proceeding, Lord. We ask you, Lord, just in this time, this nation, that you bring peace, that you bring healing. Lord, we ask you to continue to protect our military. We ask you to protect those who are our first responders, those who work in the hospitals. Lord, we just ask you to cast your protection wide across this entire nation during this time to bring us together in one in you. We ask for wisdom today and for all of our commissioners to be able to make decisions that are correct, Lord, that forward your will and that forward the peace of their communities. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. With the welcome guests portion, I don't see Mr. Rachel, you see any other elected officials? I guess what we'll do right now, again, welcome to Charlotte County for those of you who are visiting. Glad to see you all here. Appreciate you attending. Hope everything is well in your communities, in your families. These are challenging times, obviously. So, again, thank you for participating today. Like we normally do, I'm going to go through and ask everybody to mention your name and what organization you're affiliated with, and we'll go through the room. Start here.
Mike Coates with the Water Supply Authority.
Good morning, Terry Holcomb with the Water Supply Authority.
I'm Kevin Morris with the River Water Authority.
Good morning, Katie Judy with HDR.
Richard Anderson with the authority staff.
And the authority staff.
Chris Sheriff with Aurora.
Good morning, Tim Kern with AECOM.
Good morning, Alex Bugallo with Hilltop Security.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Ishii from Hazen and Sawyer.
Hello, Mike McGee from Black and Beach.
Joseph Jones, Desoto County.
Good morning, Craig Rudy, Charlotte County Utilities.
Bert Warner, Desoto County. Doug Ekman, Kinley Horn.
Katie Gilmore, Madison County.
Mark Simpson, Manning County.
In the very back. Is that?
Jean Stage in Charlotte County.
Good morning, Gene. All right, folks. We're now at public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board at this point, either on an agenda item or non-agenda item, would have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone who would want to address the board? Anyone wanting to address the board? Okay, seeing no one, commissioners, we're going to move ahead. Right now, I'm going to open the public hearing for the budget for fiscal year 2021, and we'll start off with a presentation by Mr. Lehman.
Thank you. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's my pleasure and privilege to present to you today our proposed budget for FY21, which starts October 1st. The budget itself provides the funding for programs to meet our mission of the authority and continue our vision to create, maintain, and expand a regional water supply system, assuring the residents and businesses of the region a reliable, safe, and affordable water supply. This board approved the tentative budget at your May board meeting. That tentative budget and all the backup materials were posted on our website, so it was open for all to review in true transparency. It's been looked at by your member staffs, your member administrations, available to your board of commissions, external agencies, and regional local governments, and specifically SwiftMud also involved. More importantly, the public. There have been no comments received nor changes to that tentative budget, so we stand here today with a hearing with no changes to the tentative budget and for your action for final approval of the budget. We are an enterprise fund, meaning that we based on user pay, water rates, grants, and fees. We have the administrative function based out of Lakewood Ranch, which takes care of the administration and future planning for the authority. The facilities, of course, is the major cost center with the facilities operations of water supply and transmission infrastructure. Technical services, construction services. We also have land management within that and environmental services. Looking at the budget, our current budget compared to the proposed next year's budget, you can see there's a decrease of approximately $10.5 million. That decrease is primarily into the CIP construction. This year we are in the midst of constructing 2 major pipelines, which will be completed, and we have a lull in the construction for next year, but we have a lot of plans in place. You can see there the changes in the administrative office function cost, approximately $25,000 increase, with the primary deduction in the budget being the construction cost for CIP at the facilities. Looking over the last 5 years, you can see on the orange part, the steady cost for O&M, approximately a 2 to 3% increase, which pretty much mimics the increase in population served and water demands over that time. The blue is the non-O&M. You'll see a bigger bump in the proposed budget, most of that due to our increased needs for R&R. As our infrastructure starts aging, that becomes more critical. The green being the CIP construction, and that shows pretty dramatically over the last 5 years. The decrease for next year, the basic changes being the last 2 years being the construction of major pipelines. The expenditures for the $51.3 million, you can see that well over a third of it is the O&M costs in the blue. The debt service, which you'll hear more about in the debt service in a future board item coming up. Projects, which are capital projects, and also R&R projects that will increase next year. The county payments at $2.8 million. Take a good look at that, because next year you're going to see a big reduction in that. That encompasses the payments for the 91 facility acquired from General Development, which you have the pleasure, this board will have the pleasure of shredding that mortgage next year and no more payments within it. The disbursements is reimbursement to our customers of debt service coverage. Others, which includes debt service coverage, R&R contributions, and the transfer to CIP, or those make up the other costs of $6 million. Where do we get that money? As I said before, we're an enterprise fund based on water rates and grants and fees. Water sales makes up 2/3 of our revenue cost. The CIP funds, which are in hand to be transferred for projects, grants, and we do thank the state and SwiftMud making those grants possible. The other 1.7 consists of member contributions to fund the administrative cost and also the planning assessments, which plans out for the future and visions of this authority. The reserve funds of $3.5 million are scheduled reserve funds. They're not emergency funds. They're primarily out of the R&R reserves for repair work, and also this rate stabilization fund, which we save up to make sure we don't have rate bumps. Monies forward, or monies remaining in the account at the end of the year in accordance with our policies and bond covenants. Water rates are based on 2 components, the base rate charge, which is based on the allocation, and also debt service by projects of participation by our members and customers, and the water use charge, which is based on actual meter delivery cost. You can see here the debt service. There are 3 major components of debt service for water supply. As I said before, that 91 acquisition will disappear after this budget into the future. Those debt service are based on the allocations of specific customers and allocated accordingly. The same with debt service for pipelines. It's based on the participation of the customers to pay that are obligated to that debt service. The fixed O&M costs are based on a unitary rate of your pro rata to the water allocation of the water supply, master water supply contract. You can see here how those allocations are divided between the 4 primary customers we have. Basically, Sarasota and Charlotte are fairly much equal customers in current water allocations. You can see where Northport is approximately 2.9 MGD and a small percentage allocated to Desoto County. Those water rates then for the base charge, based on those allocations, based on the debt service, the overall increase in the customer base rate is approximately 3%, up from the current budget of $24.9 million. You can see how those are allocated then with Charlotte County, approximately $10 million, DeSoto County, a little over $500,000, Manatee County, although not receiving water, benefits from some of the future construction that they've agreed to in the current budget. And continue into the proposed. Sarasota County, you can see, is the biggest subscriber with $12.6 million proposed base rate increase, and then City of North approximately $2.5 million. The water use charge, the current use charge is 76 cents, so there is a 3-cent increase based on increased chemical cost, increased electrical costs. That is approximately the typical user, trickling that down to the typical residential user of 4,000 gallons per month would be an increase of approximately 12 cents per month for the typical user. The price that cost provides for a reliable and safe water supply for all your residents and customers. The member fees are shown here. Those are allocated out. 50% of the total cost, administrative cost, are spread 25% to each member, and the remaining 50% is then based on populations. So it is only the 4 county members, not the city of Northport, which is a customer, but not a member. Looking at the planning assessments, there's an increase for the proposed budget from last year, based on this board approving at the last board meeting the feasibility studies for the future reservoir, the feasibility studies for future transmission. These fees are spread, allocated based on population in accordance with the board policies. So you can see there how that spreads out. So bottom line, staff proposes no changes to the tentative budget, with a total budget proposed for FY 2021 of $51,267,201. With that, Mr. Chairman, I turn the meeting back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Lehman at this point? Or open up the public comment? Okay, seeing none. This is the public comment section of our public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the board on the proposed budget, please step forward, state your name for the record. You'll be given 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to address the board on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021, please step forward, state your name for the record. You'll be given 3 minutes. Very good. Commissioners, I see no one stepping forward on the public comment portion. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion is second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Okay, going to the next item. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the budget for fiscal year 2021 in the amount of $51,267,201.
So move.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the budget for fiscal year 2021. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Again, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution 2020-04, the resolution setting forth rates, fees, and charges for fiscal year 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second to approve resolution 2020-04, resolution setting forth rates, fees, and charges for fiscal year 2021. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. I guess we're at the point now, we're at the consent. And Commissioners, anybody want to pull anything from consent? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the consent agenda? I just want to mention to folks there's a lot of great stuff in this consent agenda. We're just not glossing over it. We all had a pre-agenda meetings and gone through it in great detail. Appreciate all the help from staff on this, but I appreciate the motion too. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're up to the regular agenda. First item. Good morning, Mr. Anderson.
Good morning. Okay. Get my... Okay, there we go. Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. Richard Anderson for the record. As usual, this is the water supply conditions update. It's an information item only. First off, as usual, we'll take a look at the rainfall. As you can see, and I mentioned last meeting, we've kind of had rainfall has come in spurts this year. But starting way back in November, December, January, we get a little bit of rain and then average rain and then almost no rain. And it's kind of continued through as we started the wet season. Had a very wet end of May and early June. Then we had 3 weeks of very dry weather in June. And as of the day we put this package together, we had only had 3.3 inches of rain in July. Fortunately, we're back up here to about 7.5 inches as we ended the month, so about average rainfall. So all told, we've had about 20 inches of rain in the last 3 months, but we haven't had that big downpour that we usually get to get everything filled up. So still waiting on that. As you can see, the river flow kind of responds accordingly. We're at about average conditions in the river. When we put the report together again, we were about 660 CFS in the river. With those rains we got towards the end of July, we're up to about 1,400 CFS in the river, which is actually right about average for this time of year. And with river withdrawals, again, we started about mid-June with withdrawals, ended up taking about 36 MGD out in June, and since then we've had adequate flow in the river and able to take water, and we averaged about 70 MGD through July. So getting to the point where we're getting close to filling the system back up, as you'll see in a minute. Surface water storage, as I mentioned, right now, as of July 15th, we were right at 5 billion gallons. Fast forward 2 weeks later to today, we're at 5.85 billion, so we're approaching that 6 billion gallon mark. We've got about another 700 million to go, and I think we'll be full in the next 3 weeks or so, back to status. ASR storage, no change since the last meeting. We're sitting right at 8.14 billion in actual volume. Usable volume is just under 5 billion at 4.9 billion. So we expect to start recharging that system early next week and start building that supply up again as well. So, and the estimated days of supply, the green shaded area represents the average days of supply at our current rate, which is 27.5 MGD, and that gives us 285 days, about 9.5 months. Excuse me, incorrect. That gives us about 12 months of supply, 359 days. If we were to supply the water at the contract rate of 34.7, that would be 9.5 months or 285 days. So right now we have about 12 months of supply on hand. Okay, now as we look to the production, this is for the month of June. As you can see, the authority produced 28.74 MGD to the customers. York County and city facilities produced 48.25, totaling just under 77 MGD for the month of June. 3.7 of that was supplied by Manatee County to their consecutive customers on the coast. So the net usage by authority members and customers was 73.3 MGD. Charlotte County used just under 11 million gallons from the authority, 10.8, produced 0.4 from Burnt Store for a total of 11.23, or about 58% of their available capacity. As you can see down below on the red bars, for the 12-month running average, it's up to 11.35, which is approaching 2017 numbers, which was a very dry year. That's when we had the drought for about 11 months, starting in November, going through about August. So usage is up, as you'll see in the next couple of slides as we work through this. With the exception of Desoto County. But Desoto County, again, they used 0.53 from the authority, produced 0.34 for themselves, about 0.9 MGD, or 61%. And their usage is driven mostly by, they have a large system, they do a lot of flushing, so even though it looks like they're on decline, they actually are being very efficient with their usage and have done a great job of late, the last few years, of controlling their flushing and managing their system very effectively. So, Manatee County used 38.5 MGD for their customers, exported 3.6 to Sarasota County, again 3.7 to their consecutives on the coast. Total production was almost 46 MGD for the month of June, or 88% of their capacity. And again, on the red bar here, the 12-month running average, you can see dramatic increase in their usage, at least in the last 12 months, up over 2.5 MGD as compared to water year 19. So again, demands appear to be creeping up. Don't know if it's because everyone's home from the COVID or water usage is up. That remains to be seen. So, Sarasota County continues to rely on authority supply while they do their construction at the Carlton facility. They use 15.5 from the authority, imported 3.8 from Sarasota County and a little bit from the city of Northport, and produced 0.6 from their facilities, totaling almost 20 MGD for their system for the month. That's 59%. And you can see again, they're up a little bit, not quite as much as Manatee County, but the trend, it's definitely trending towards increased demands. City of Northport used just under 2 MGD from the authority, self-produced about 1 MGD, and again, they delivered 0.13 to Sarasota County. Total usage for them was 2.8 MGD, or 45% of their total capacity. And their demands, again, are trending up a little bit, but not quite as much as the other Manatee and Sarasota counties. And overall, looking at the regional demand, as you can see, the 12-month running average is almost 75 MGD, which compared to the last couple of years is up. That's over 3 MGD right there, almost 3.5 MGD of total increase for the region. So again, demands are going up as it appears. And over the last 9.5 years, this graph represents, total growth is about 1.63 average increase over the last 10 years. For the month of June, again, the utilization, we have 105 MGD available, just under 77 used. That left 27.7 available, or 73.5% utilized for the month of June. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Always a great presentation. I appreciate it. I do think you're correct. I think it's a combination of it being dry and also everybody being home, during this pandemic and coming back out. It'd be interesting at the individual utilities to see how the water bills were for commercial and retail and that type of stuff compared to the residential bills that went up. I know ours went up at home.
I agree.
Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Trace.
Just curious, where do y'all actually get your rainfall data from? Actually at the plant, which would have no effect on withdrawal, would it?
Correct. Historically, what we use are 3 gauges along the Peace River. We use one up towards the head near Bartow, actually in Winter Haven. We use one at the midpoint around Wauchula, and we use one down at, it's called the Joshua Gauge near Arcadia. So we kind of take the rainfall across the basin and we average that, and that's the number we use for the month. So it's the way we've done it historically for the last 20 years, and we just continue on using that method. So.
Very good. Commissioner Mayo, any comments?
Sir.
Good. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. Second item on the regular agenda is the Peace River Regional Reservoir Number 3 consultant contract. I was wondering what was going on there.
Gloves.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Good morning, Terry. You have a green light there on your mic?
I do, yes. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Terry Holcomb with Authority staff. This item is presented for board approval of the consultant contract for the Peace River Regional Reservoir Number 3 project, as well as the work order number 1 under this contract for the siting and feasibility phase services. So the Peace River Facility Expansion Project has been identified as a future water supply source for the region since 2015, when the expansion project was identified in the authority's Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan, as well as the district's Regional Water Supply Plan. Now, that expansion project is comprised of 4 key components. That includes a new diversion structure and pump station on the Peace River, a new raw water storage reservoir located on the R.V. Griffin Reserve, the raw water pipelines that convey the water from the pump station to the reservoir, and expanded capacity at the treatment plant. So the first milestone for this expansion project occurred in 2019, when the authority secured the water use permit from the Water Management District, allowing withdrawals from the Peace River to increase to 258 million gallons per day. The second milestone for this project is the development of a mitigation strategy to address the environmental impacts that will be primarily associated with siting the reservoir on the R.V. Griffin Reserve. So given the uncertainty with mitigation opportunities within both the Peace River Basin and the Myakka River Basin, it was the board's decision to secure a consultant to help with this feasibility and planning phase, as well as the design and construction phase services for the reservoir. So the project was identified in our fiscal 21 5-year CIP, and the feasibility and siting phase services were budgeted at about $1.5 million. Now, $250,000 of that were already in this fiscal year's 2020's budget. And then we received cooperative funding from the Water Management District for 50% of that remaining $1.25 million. So you can see we have the authority at $625,000 of funding for the feasibility study, and the Water Management District, the other 50%, $625,000. So just a recap of the consultant selection and contract milestones to date. You can see the authority went out for advertisement for the SOQs in November of last year. We went through the shortlisting, the ranking, interview, and selection process. And that brings us to today, where we are looking for approval of the agreement and that first work order number 1 for the feasibility and siting study. That was about a 9-month. We had a little bit of a delay there with the COVID and missing a board meeting, but about 9 months between advertisement and award. So in your board books, you'll have a copy of the actual contract and then the scope of services for the siting and feasibility study. There's primarily 8 key components in that scope of services, starting with project management, communication, and coordination services that'll last the duration of the contract. The development of a decision support framework for evaluation of the siting alternatives, including the siting of the pump station and the raw water pipelines. Environmental and permitting services, including development of that mitigation strategy. Geotechnical and geological evaluations, primarily associated with siting the reservoir on the reserve. Hydraulics, water quality, and operational considerations. And we talk about water quality, we're not just looking at the water quality of the river, although that's important. We're also talking about the water quality of the reservoir system, now having those 3 reservoirs operating together. Land use, acquisition, and rights-of-way services. We need to identify specifically, not so much for the reservoir, but we're looking at the siting of that pump station on the river, on the Peace River, any land acquisition that might be necessary there, as well as those raw water pipeline corridors. Construction site access and sequencing. It's very important that we aren't short-sighted in citing these improvements. These infrastructure improvements are pretty large, so we want to make sure we're looking towards constructability issues that might occur in the future. And then they all culminate with Task 8, which is the development of the feasibility and siting report. That report will also contain an updated cost estimate for all of these improvements. So looking at the schedule and budget for the siting and feasibility study, you can see, hopefully with approval today, the consultant can begin work next month in September. They anticipate about a 16-month turnaround on the feasibility and siting report, with a product finished in December of 2021. And with a $100,000 owner's allowance, you can see that we just eked under the $1.5 million budget at $1,499,983.20. So with that, I would like to present a staff recommendation for approval and authorization for the executive director to execute the agreement for professional services related to the Peace River Regional Reservoir project with HDR Engineering, as well as authorization for the executive director to execute work order number 1, the Peace River Regional Reservoir project siting and feasibility phase, for an amount not to exceed $1,499,983.20.
Commissioners, any comments or questions for Terry?
I have a.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, first of all, in the way of comments, you did a great job, as you always do. But I think it's important for people who view this and don't live with it day to day, that there's been a series of actions by this board citing the absolutely wonderful 50-year Swift Mud permit, and it was a very logical, sequential way of going about business.
Correct.
And I want to thank our staff for that. They really did a great job. I do have one question, a little sarcastic. I only have another 28 months, 2 years and 4 months on this board. I have an expectation that HDR will design it, build it, and fill it in those months. Is that a likely thing to happen, Terry?
As much as I would like to say yes, unfortunately, Commissioner, that is very highly unlikely that we will have an operating reservoir in 28 months and how many days?
And I say that in jest because I personally was surprised. I knew it wouldn't fill immediately, but the 2 to 3 years it takes just to fill the reservoir. I also want to add, as a comment, and you correct me if any of my comments are wrong, we have consistently represented that we were not going to site the reservoir on Orange Hammock, that we would not touch the water on Orange Hammock, and unless I'm wrong, this authority has lived up to that representation exactingly. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Just believe it or not, I still get asked about that. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trace, any comments? The only thing I would mention is that I had a conversation with Mr. Lehman here about a week ago. You know, I would think it'd be a great opportunity, recognizing that this is our last shot at this piece of property, our property, to be able to create a reservoir due to the wetlands and the impacts of those wetlands and so forth. It would seem logical to me that we would try to, we talk in the documentation of duplicating, creating another 6 billion gallons. You know, I think there'd be some merit to actually looking at expanding that storage capability. I don't know what that would be, but I think this would be the phase of the activities, Commissioner, that if we could go to 8 billion or something of that nature, I think it would be wise for this board to give that kind of direction during the siting and feasibility to see what we could do. Of course, it's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be done. I mean, do you go up higher? Do you go, in more area? But I think this is our last shot at this piece of property, doing something along the lines of surface storage. So I'd like the idea of going and try to see what we can maximize as far as storage on the property. Commissioner Mayo?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mr. Chairman. I think that we need to do that. We need to analyze it. And I, frankly, am keenly interested in what HDR represented as just a possibility when we were doing the selection about isolating the three, once we have the third one, isolating the 3 reservoirs in case something happened at one in the way of a algae bloom or something. So that I do think we need to do that. We're in great shape, but I think we're using only 74% of our actual capacity right now. And we have a sufficient supply, we always represented, for the next 10 to 20 years. This was going to take us way beyond that with an adequate supply. But let's just do it now. And if the reservoir has to be a little bigger, now's the time to look at it so that when we do the whole gigantic project of the mitigation in two basins, that we get that done now and not try to add it on in a couple of years.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Commissioner Trace, do you?
I'm fine with looking at it.
Yeah, it's a
I have no idea if there's a downside to that, having not thought of this until right now. So,
Well,
but
I
yeah,
agree.
never hurts to look at anything.
See what we can do,
Exactly.
And the reason I brought it up, too, is we had been
Costs are not going to go down on building things.
That's exactly correct. And the other thing that kind of spurred it with me is that I'm getting information now from our economic development people and others that, a lot of folks up in the Northeast right now are really seriously considering leaving those areas, or really quite the metro areas in general up north. So I think some of our growth projections, we may want to revisit some of those here in another couple of years to see what's really happening. So again, we may be having more folks moving into our region than originally anticipated, although I think we'll have healthy growth anyways, but I think we may see even more. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think you make an excellent point, and it's great to realize that those future neighbors of ours that are living up north finally realize this is the place to be. Seriously.
Yeah.
I've got kids that are stuck in the 17th floor of a condo in New York City for something like 16, 17 weeks now and not allowed to move. I can tell you that they and their friends have an insane incentive, tax-wise, livability-wise, to get out of there and come here. And I'm a guy who grew up there. So this is going to happen. I think we're going to see that accelerate.
It's not if, it's when, sir, I believe.
Yes, sir.
I would appreciate a motion to approve and authorize the executive director to execute the agreement for professional services related to the Peace River Regional Reservoir PR3 project with HDR Engineering Incorporated.
So move.
Well, I'll take that as a motion in a second.
Yes.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Also, a motion to approve and authorize the executive director to execute work order number 1, Peace River Regional Reservoir Project Siting and Feasibility Phase for an amount not to exceed $1,499,983.20.
So move.
Again, I get a motion in a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, we're up to, and you've got the next item. Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan 2020.
Commissioners, for the record, Terry Holcomb with Authority staff. So every 5 years, the Authority completes an update to our Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan. You saw a presentation in December on the key components of the plan, where it was. Today, we would like to present to you our 5-year update with the 2020 plan. We embarked on this effort in August of 2018, and I'm happy to say that Ms. Katie Duty with HDR Engineering is here today to present the summary of the Authority's Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan 2020 update. After her presentation, we would like to recommend for a board motion that you receive and file the Integrated Water Supply Plan for the 2020 update. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Duty.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to be here today to present to you the final version of this master plan. As Terry said, I'm Katie Duty with HDR. On this project, I was our principal. Our project manager, Ryan Messer, who presented to you in December a status update, couldn't be here today. So I'm pleased today to share with you our final version of the master plan. Here's a quick agenda of what I'm going to cover this morning in the presentation. So the first question is, why do we do an integrated regional water supply plan? And by looking at a regional level, we're able to balance supplies and demands and make sure we don't overstress, as you just talked about, as the region grows as a whole. Planning is the first step towards achieving your mission. This plan is updated every 5 years, and so it gives you a solid 5-year planning horizon. It also lets you stay in lockstep with the Water Management District that does 5-year plan updates as well. Planning ensures coordination and consistency with the various regulatory planning documents. It also promotes cooperation and coordination with your customers and with the district. Here are the key elements of the plan. We started with the regional facility plan updates. We worked through various projections and evaluations. We got to a CIP plan, and then finally this plan. And all throughout this process, over the timeline that Terry mentioned, it included analysis and work product, meetings and presentations with your staff, with your customers, staff, and also the district. Regional supplies, demands, and finished water capacity needs are the foundation for gauging sustainable future growth. Current regional drinking water supplies are 103.5 MGD. However, the availability can change based on facilities as they come offline or online. So for this effort, we looked at regional demand projections using a similar method from plans in the past. We started with 7 different methodologies and dropped the highest and the lowest. In this case, it happened to be the first one and the 7th. Then we looked again at the remaining 5 and averaged the highest and the lowest, which in this case were numbers 3 and 4. And those numbers were used for finished water capacity need projections. So looking at finished water requirements for your customers, looking 50 years out, we can project needs and when additional capacity needs to be online and available. The dark blue area of this graph looks at the average demands, and the lighter blue is additional water needed to comply with your 17% capacity standard. And as a reminder, that 17% capacity standard is comprised of 2 components. The first is a 6% rotational reserve capacity, and that's for supplies needed to move water around the regional system in case there's a short-term water supply need where a particular member needs more than their allocation for a short period of time. The second component of that 17% capacity standard is the 90% capacity standard, and that's authority policy to have new infrastructure online before 90% of the regional demand and rotational reserve buffers exceeded. So as you can see by looking at this graph, new capacity is needed by 2030 to meet that 17% capacity standard. 16 MGD is needed by 2040. An additional 80% MGD is needed by 2070. So in the plan, there are potential water supply development projects. We looked at, there are numerous available water supply projects in the region. This plan looked at 13 of them. We developed that list by validating previous projects that had been in the 2015 plan and also reviewing available information for regional projects since that 2015 plan was issued, including looking at reclaimed water. The 13 sources have the potential to provide up to 137.5 MGD, which is well over the needed projection by 2070. The balance of these projects sort of geography-wise is pretty good, but more projects have been identified in the southern portion than in the northern. This source list also looked at IPR, DPR within the region, and there's an appendix to our plan that includes current regulatory status for this in Florida, as well as an inventory of all of your customers' wastewater systems and the capacity. On this chart, you can see planning level capital and O&M costs for the new infrastructure. And looking at the range of the costs in that, it's anywhere from about $1 per 1,000 gallons to over $9 per 1,000 gallons. Next, after looking at sources and supply, we looked at the regional transmission systems connectivity. And as part of this master plan, we developed your first regional transmission systems model. We used that model taking 9 different individual customer models, and it contains about 5,000 miles of pipeline. This aggregated model then was used to look at a number of different scenarios. First, for year 2020, there were no major issues noted, so we used that to validate the conveyance system you currently have. Then we looked at needs out to 2040. For normal operating conditions, and there was a potential issue noted in being able to send Manatee County 5 MGD, and so the plan recommends a new pipeline to alleviate the issues there. We also looked out at 2070 for any future transmission system pipes to make sure the flows that are needed at that time can be accommodated, and there were no issues with the future transmission systems pipes. Everything's sized appropriately for the service lives that are being looked at. And then lastly, this model was used to look at emergency conditions to be able to help inform needs of urgency for pipeline projects, timing of when they need to be online. So the recommendations we've got in the regional transmission system section of the plan includes these 6 that are shown here, 4 of which are being moved forward right now for siting or routing and feasibility studies. The 4 that are advancing to routing and feasibility right now are phases 2B, 2C, 3C, and the 3C extension. Phase 2B and 2C provide a balance to send water to Charlotte County and Northport from the Peace River facility. 2B also allows for more water to the west of Charlotte County's service area. And the 2C completes the piping loop for redundancy in the north transmission system. The other one advancing to feasibility right now is Phase 3C and 3C extension, which will help the Manatee County 5 MGD needs by 2040. And it also helps Sarasota County's distribution system pressures to the west side of the service area as the University Parkway treatment plant comes offline. The two other projects listed here that we have included in the plan but need further evaluation as far as timing are Phase 2D and Phase 4. The 2D pipeline could serve to provide water to the Inglewood Water District, depending on their growth and the availability of capacity from neighboring interconnects. And then the Phase 4 piping provides a redundant source of drinking water in the isolated burnt store service area. So here's just some more information on the expansion, which this expansion really provides reliability. Back to your core mission. This table provides planning level costs and some recommended completion dates for each of these pipeline projects, with the total cost ranging from $29 million up to $61 million. The costs in this table include easement costs as well as allocation for storage and booster stations. During the recommended feasibility and routing studies, the need for that storage in those booster stations will be considered. That'll be part of the effort. And so the costs can be refined and may possibly be reduced if those aren't needed for all the pipeline projects. Another element of the plan is conservation and demand management, which lets you really look again regionally and also find the right timing, perhaps extending when capital needs are really need to be in place. So the district has a goal of 150 gallons per capita per day, and we're happy to say that the region is well below that goal, as you can see on this graph here. The region showed a significant water savings between 2004 and 2009, and this was really a result of focusing on water conservation and reduction, and since then it's remained relatively stable, so it didn't go back up. It's due to customer practices using tiered water rates and watering restrictions, also educating your customers and the public. But there's a number of other additional strategies that could be considered to further that effort. So the capital improvement plan recommendations coming out of this integrated regional plan include a number of projects. We've talked a lot about some of those today and at other times. And these are both in your 5-year CIP and your 20-year CNA. As we previously mentioned, we need additional capacity by 2030 and 16 MGD by 2040. So these projects help achieve that. 15 of the MGD can be obtained by implementing the Peace River surface water system expansion, as well as the expansion of the reservoir pump station. An additional project like the Peace River brackish water facility well field will need to be implemented by 2039 in order to meet those needs by 2040. And I talked through the pipelines previously. For Phase 2 and C, we're recommending the feasibility and routing studies start immediately, and 2B to be constructed immediately following, so do the feasibility and routing design and then proceed right to construction. Phase 2 could be delayed a bit and needs to be completed by 2036. The Phase 3 and 3C extensions are also recommended for feasibility and routing studies now, followed by immediate construction. And then pipeline Phases 2D and Phase 4 are recommended to stay on the authority's watch list and to continue discussing the needs for them with Inglewood and Charlotte County to get the timing right. And with that, I think that is the end of our presentation. So
Very good, thank you.
Questions?
I just have a few questions.
Yeah.
First of all, going back to some of the previous conversations we had today and other days, I'm sure, but just for our record, you're taking a hard look at easements and rights-of-way that we're going to need.
Yes.
Because one thing meshes with the other. As the number of houses get built and new subdivisions get built, I just don't, I'd hate to see, and I know you know this better than I, that the availability of rights-of-way easements just don't vanish on us. And then we're buying expensive developed land and possibly ripping up roads when meshing it in now in a planning document helps us with that. So is that part of your discussion, planning discussion?
Yeah, and that's part of why we're recommending the planning and routing feasibility studies be done now, so that that can be heavily considered. And looking at the options on routes includes looking at what's available for easements and rights-of-way.
And 3C and the 3C extension, do we need anything more in that heavily used corridor for development? Do we need anything else now that you know of in the way of easements or right-of-way acquisitions?
I can't think, Terry, you want to chime in?
As part of the master plan, it was a very high-level planning effort, so the routing of the pipelines have not changed since the 2015 look. That is why one of those recommendations moving forward with the feasibility of Phase 3 and 3C extension, because it's imperative that we nail those easement requirements down now, rather than 5 years down the line when we know that land out there along that corridor is quickly getting eaten up. So that is probably the key driver for moving forward with the Phase 3 and 3C pipeline studies right now.
And with both of your permission, let me just drill down. This has been my life, obviously. West Villages was my life for 15 years. Half of it is in Northport, the city of Northport, and gets served, its water needs get served by Northport. A good piece of the rest of it is, a piece of it is in Sarasota County Utilities, but another piece of it, the southern sections, are in Inglewood Water District, and they have their own separately elected board. We do interact with Inglewood Water District on a regular basis, because that's a place that also is going to come online and get developed in the years ahead. And it's, if I recall, 6-7 sections of land. So we do interact with Inglewood Water District. There's not a jurisdictional, they have their own board, we have ours. So the answer is we do.
Yes, we do. We actually have our water use permit includes the Englewood Water District. So we cooperate with them from water supply issues to interconnectivity, especially when we were looking at some of the hydraulic modeling, because they do have interconnections on the south side with Charlotte County as well as the north side with Sarasota. And as West Villages develops, the Englewood Water District completed their master plan. They worked with the West Villages and identifying the future demands there too. So there is quite a bit of communication that goes on.
Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Trace, go ahead.
Manatee County has no problem with the way the motion is worded, but just as long as we kind of realize that we still have some problems that we are working with people. So not necessarily approved, but we're fine with filing and moving on.
Understood.
I'll be happy to make that motion.
Okay.
To receive and file Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan 2020 update.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to receive and file the Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan 2020 update. Discussion. I just really appreciative of the update. It seems to me, Commissioners, when we had the workshop at Lakewood Ranch, we were talking about getting information and how all the different facilities, all the supply sources were, how they integrated and so forth. And this is great to see that, there are eyes looking at this and figuring out where things are going to happen, the sequencing of these improvements and so forth, when they're going to be needed. So I really appreciate the update.
And it is, we do coordinate these projects so that when the Water Management District is completing their regional water supply plan, all of these projects marry with their plan and receive funding, because we do coordinate with these agencies. All of our partners receive that cooperative funding.
Coordination is great. Thank you very much. Commissioners, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, item 4, the Water Quality Master Plan. Mr. Anderson, up again.
Good morning, Mr. Chair again, Richard Anderson. And for the record, I did not get a wipe down the first time I was up here, so I feel like I was a little bit shorted. So. Item 4 is the Water Quality Master Plan update. This is the update on the final version of the Water Quality Master Plan. As you may recall, back at the December meeting in Manatee County, Hazen and Sawyer gave an overview of the plan, the scope, and some of their preliminary findings. They're here today to talk about their conclusions and recommendations on the final plan and some possible next steps that we may want to consider moving forward. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Ishii. She was one of the project managers on the job, and she's here to cover those items for us. Stephanie? One second. There you go. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Ishii, and I'm an engineer with Hazen and Sawyer, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys again to discuss the Water Quality Master Plan. And so at our last update, we discussed how this Water Quality Master Plan includes 4 main components, and so those 4 components are shown here. The first of which is an evaluation of source and finished water quality, considering the current and potential future regulatory climate. And for this Water Quality Master Plan, what that really involved was doing a compilation of all of that data and really leveraging business intelligence tools to quickly visualize the historical data and the trends that are there. The second component is a regulatory review and coupled with a risk assessment to look at the efficacy of the existing treatment barriers and the potential role of future treatment barriers. The third component was an evaluation of potential optimization opportunities at the Peace River facility, specifically focusing on regional corrosion control options and the regional water quality standards. And the last component there is an evaluation of treatment enhancements, so looking into the future for those potential future regulations and what that means in terms of treatment changes. And the focus of this component was increased total organic carbon removal. So just going to march through each of those 4 components and the major findings that were associated with each. The first here is a coupling of that evaluation of source and finished water quality and the regulatory review. And very importantly, what the first finding there is that the authority is compliant with existing federal and state water quality requirements at the Peace River facility, as well as at each of the points of connection. But even with that understanding, the authority is being proactive in terms of preparing for potential future regulatory changes, and that's happening through two different methods. First of all, the authority is conducting additional raw and finished water quality sampling for unregulated contaminants, and this is really important so that the authority has a better understanding of the occurrence of those unregulated constituents, as well as the efficacy of the existing treatment barriers should regulations change in the future. And additionally, this Water Quality Master Plan includes a library of just a broad spectrum of the existing regulations, as well as potential future regulations, considering precedents that have been set by other states and research that's going on within the industry. Then lastly, you see there that lead and copper rule changes are anticipated to impact the authority, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail as we move forward through the presentation. The Water Quality Master Plan does include some specific recommendations for additional sampling to best prepare for potential future regulatory changes, and this is just a simplified table of those recommendations here, and all of these were considering the regulatory climate as well as the watershed characteristics for the Peace River, again, to best prepare for communication, for messaging, and for potential changes in the future. So now moving into the second component of the master plan, which is the evaluation of those optimization opportunities in terms of operations, the focus here being corrosion control. So this work was really motivated by the fact that there are unique corrosion control strategies practiced throughout the region at this time, and there are some factors that could potentially change what might be most appropriate as we move into the future. And so some of those factors include varying demands as we move into the future, which will impact the extent to which different sources are traveling to different areas of the distribution system. And again, those regulations come back. There's potential future regulatory changes within the lead and copper rule that could also impact the potential for corrosion control changes as you move into the future. So as I mentioned, right now, there are various corrosion control strategies that are practiced by each of the customers throughout the regional system. And very importantly, all customers do comply with the existing lead and copper rule requirements. And because of that, all customers are also subject to reduced monitoring to continuously ensure that compliance as they move into the future. We did use hydraulic modeling from the Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan that was actually just presented by Terry and Katie to look at the potential interfaces now and into the future between those different corrosion control strategies. And that's what this image here is showing you. The different colors represent different source waters from various customers. And so where the colors meet are potentially where different corrosion control strategies meet. And so as part of the Water Quality Master Plan, we looked at the compatibilities and the potential incompatibilities between those unique corrosion control strategies under current demands as well as into future demands. So the plan really looked at two different approaches for corrosion control. One is maintaining those individual strategies for each of the customers. Certainly many benefits associated with that in terms of low capital costs because we're maintaining the status quo. There's a successful track record as demonstrated by the compliance that has been historically achieved. And it also allows for local optimization. When you're having those unique strategies, you're able to really control your strategy for your specific conditions. We compared that with a regional approach. So what if there was a uniform corrosion control strategy throughout the region that would eliminate the mixing zones, and so we wouldn't have to worry about those incompatibilities between strategies? It lends itself to operational simplicity because everyone's doing the same thing. And lastly, it lends itself, of course, to uniform conditions throughout. So at the result of that, at the conclusion of that evaluation and that comparison, the main recommendation is that no changes to corrosion control are recommended at this time. And that really is because of the successful track record of those unique corrosion control strategies by each of the customers and the extent to which those interfaces are expected to change into the future. But with that said, we do recommend monitoring the long-term lead and copper rule revisions, specifically with respect to how that influences your sampling requirements as well as action response plans. And then to continually focus and look at those interfaces between the different corrosion control strategies in terms of what that means in terms of blending and also the actual efficacy of those strategies with respect to corrosion control. And so in the Water Quality Master Plan, there are some recommendations for the sampling and the monitoring that can happen at each of those interfaces to make sure that those incompatibilities aren't jeopardizing corrosion control. Now, the third component of the Water Quality Master Plan was looking at the potential for implementation of regional water quality standards. And so the current approach for the authority is to meet state and federal requirements at each point of connection. And certainly an option is to maintain that approach into the future. But as part of this Water Quality Master Plan, we wanted to look at a potential alternative where the authority works with each of the individual customers to implement additional water quality requirements in excess of just the state and federal requirements. And what that allows is for a prioritization of water quality limits that are of importance to each individual customer. And typically those are rolled out in one of two ways. One way is an action response plan, where the focus is really on the establishment of a mutual understanding of what those prioritized water quality standards are, the establishment of very clear communication pathways between the authority and the individual customers, and monitoring protocols for ensuring compliance with those water quality standards. And then, of course, there's the action response. It's when there's a trigger that's observed, what are the specific actions that are laid out to either make a corrective action or to confirm that a water quality standard is being met. The alternative approach is a water supply contract, which is, of course, a more formal contractual obligation to meet water quality standards in excess of state and federal requirements. There's less of an emphasis here on communication and the roadmap for actions if a certain trigger is achieved, and more of a formality in terms of the where the obligation lies. And so in the Water Quality Master Plan, the recommendation is to continuously explore the potential benefits of an action response plan. So that really lends itself to additional discussions between the authority and the customers for if there are water quality standards in excess of state and federal requirements that would benefit operations and communications and ultimately the product water that's being delivered to their customers. And to help inform that conversation, there is also recommendations in the plan for additional monitoring that can be done at each of those points of connections to really serve as a basis for what those different parameters could be that would benefit the customers in excess of just regulatory requirements. Now, lastly, the fourth component of the plan was an evaluation of potential treatment enhancements. Again, the focus was on total organic carbon, and that's really because of the role that total organic carbon plays throughout the regional system. So the total organic carbon that's in that river water that's withdrawn, it has impacts all the way from the management of the reservoirs through ultimately what is delivered to your taps. Total organic carbon drives chemical demands at the treatment facilities. It impacts disinfectant stability within the distribution system. It impacts the extent to which flushing is needed within the distribution system, taste and odor challenges, as well as disinfection byproduct formation in the finished water. And just as a simple example, the graph here shows date on the x-axis, and the orange line is showing your total organic carbon in finished water. And you can see that that tracks with the blue line, which is trihalomethanes, which are a disinfection byproduct. So as total organic carbon goes up, so do disinfection byproducts. So it's very important that we keep good control of the total organic carbon in our raw and our finished water. And so by looking at historical treatment performance, at existing regulations, and at finished water quality, the recommendation is that, or the main finding is that the total organic carbon removal at the Peace River facility is excellent, and that there is no need for additional removal at this time. With that said, there are potential future drivers for additional TOC removal. For example, there might be operational and distribution system challenges that warrant additional exploration of whether TOC removal would help simplify those operations. If there are source water quality changes, that of course can also prompt a treatment enhancement for total organic carbon removal. And then regulatory changes, that can also trigger an increase in the enhancement of that TOC removal. And so with all of that in mind, the Water Quality Master Plan does document several options for increased TOC removal should it be needed. Some of those options include optimized river withdrawals, of course balancing quality and quantity to help minimize the total organic carbon that's initially withdrawn from the river. There are optimized treatment enhancement options, and then there are not just optimizing the existing treatment barriers, but actually adding on treatment barriers that are also documented within the plan. And so now to conclude, just the summary and the next steps. So in summary, the Peace River facility is meeting required water quality regulations and goals. The authority's reservoir system benefits water supply and quality. This was a conversation that I think we had at the last update where you could see that that reservoir system not only provides reliability from a supply standpoint, but it also really helps even out the water quality that's observed in the river so that the Peace River treatment facility isn't seeing that same variability. So the reservoir really helps temper some of that variability. The Peace River facility provides consistent water quality to the customers and achieves excellent TOC removal. All of the customers, with their unique corrosion control strategies, are meeting current lead and copper rule requirements, and there are blending interfaces in the distribution system that are subject to potential change as sources and demands change, and so there's a recommendation for continued monitoring at those locations. Regional water quality standards could be beneficial to the authority, and so that really lends itself to additional conversations with the customers about what specific parameters would be of interest. And then, and lastly, water quality considerations are, of course, a critical component of water supply planning. And so in terms of next steps, there are specific recommendations for increased water quality monitoring at the sources and at each individual point of connection. There's, of course, the recommendation to continue to use water quality to optimize river water withdrawals and reservoir management. That's already done to some extent now by looking at river flows as well as the salt content of the river, but there's potential opportunity for additional water quality parameters to monitor and optimize. Continue to monitor regulatory updates, particularly the lead and copper rule, and continue to monitor drivers for increased TOC removal, whether that be from a distribution system operational perspective or from a regulatory perspective. Work to obtain consensus on regional water quality standards. And then lastly, integrate water quality modeling into future water supply planning. And so the water supply plan is a recurring activity for the authority. Importantly, as you guys just discussed, looking at the integrated nature of the various supply options and how that lends itself to future conditions. And the same goes for water quality. As regulatory conditions change, as source water quality changes, really important to consider water quality as well in your water supply planning efforts. And so with that, certainly any comments or questions are very welcome.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Commissioner Mayo? Any comments? Yeah, the only thing I was going to say was obviously the obtaining consensus on regional water quality standards. That'll be quite an effort, I think. I would assume that all the individual utilities will want to look at what that cost would be. I mean, whatever the standards would look like. I mean, how long it would take to implement and all that. And I assume that's in the game plan, Richard, if we were to proceed down that pathway. Makes sense. But obviously status quo works. We meet all the regulatory requirements to create a uniform regional standard. Nice, interesting goal. But what's that going to cost each individual utility to implement something like that? So that's going to take some time to figure that all out. But
Yes, and absolutely one of the first steps that's in the master plan is that monitoring to really establish whether or not is there a reason to consider those additional standards. Are you maybe already meeting a lot of the things that would already be considered the limit? And so if so, it might not even be a change in treatment or a change in quality, but rather just the monitoring to ensure that that's consistently being met.
yeah, the standards may not, they might in reality might not be that much different, but there might be some tweaking to do to make it all work. But I'd be curious to see how that all plays out. Thank you very much. Commissioners, I need a motion to receive and file the Peace River Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Water Quality Master Plan.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, passes unanimously.
Great.
Again,
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 5, Bond Series 2010A and 2010B refunding opportunities. Ms. Lee.
There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Lee of the authority staff. Due to some very favorable rates that Sarasota County encountered, and there are some recent refundings, Commissioner Mayo requested that we as well investigate some potential refunding opportunities. As such, I'd like to introduce Mr. Alex Bigallo, the authority's financial advisor with Hilltop Securities, who will be discussing these opportunities for board consensus and direction.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you today. I did want to go ahead and start off. I know that I'll start off my presentation with a brief overview of the financial markets. It should not be a surprise to any of you where the financial markets are today. Rates are extremely low. We see it through mortgage rates and it's still the continued purchasing of new homes in Florida, and particularly in the South, and in Florida is doing really, really well. And you've seen it through your own entities as well that have done refinancings of existing debt over the last several months to take advantage of these rates. You can see from the chart that is on page 1 here that obviously we've experienced a lot of volatility. Rates changed significantly in the last 6 months. There was a period of about a month or so where we saw, and you see the big spike there. Most of these are indices that are, a couple of these indices are short-term, meaning that their rates are weekly rates or monthly rates or yearly rates, but most of these indices are long-term rates, meaning that they're rates for 10 to 30 years. And what you saw for that month or so was a lot of uncertainty in the market, is obviously the outbreak of COVID-19 was taking place. And at one point, the Federal Reserve basically came out and said that they were going to provide a lot of liquidity in the market, and they were willing to purchase, obviously, treasuries, agencies, including municipal bonds as well, to provide liquidity. And at that point, you saw the market stabilize again. And since then, if you look at where rates are today compared to where we were 6 months ago, we're lower than what we were 6 months ago. Not significantly lower, but we're still lower than what we were 6 months ago. So it's a very good market for municipal issuers right now, and anybody who's looking to borrow debt. By the way, these rates are as of 7/10, so they're about 3 weeks old now. And so just to let you know, just to give you an idea here, at that time, the 10-year Treasury was at 0.65. The 10-year Treasury last time I checked today was around 0.55, so about 10 basis points lower, just to give you an idea. So they have continued to improve. What I want to focus on this slide is the bottom part of it, the bottom chart. And this chart does is it shows you the range and interest rates on municipal tax-exempt debt. All the way, the blue line shows you the range going back to 2008, so the last 12 years. The green light for the last couple years, or 2.5 years. And you can see that, and obviously the blue line shows you where rates were as of July 10th. You can see that we're at or near historically lows on all of these maturities, all the way from bonds that mature a year from now, to 10 years from now, to 30 years from now. So again, it's no surprise to see where interest rates are today, but they are and continue to be at historical low levels. This obviously provides an opportunity for the board and the authority to consider refunding some of its existing debt. And some of these bonds, obviously the 2010A, 2010B, which are your Build America bonds, and your 2014As are all currently callable, meaning that the call date on those bonds either has already come or they can be called beginning on October 1. Unlike mortgages can be called, we can refinance our mortgages at any time. Most bond deals have a certain call date that you need to adhere to before you can actually redeem those bonds and refinance. And that's what that is. So you have 3 out of all the bonds that we've identified, your 2010As, 2010Bs, and your 2014A, which is a privately placed bank loan, are the ones that obviously can be called immediately. So if you look at where the rates and where these issuances are, they were originally issued. You can see the chart shows how much was originally issued for each issuance and how much is currently outstanding and how much is currently callable. Most of these mature, with the exception of your 2014As, which are relatively short. That's your bank loan again. That matures in 2027. The other bonds here, 2010As and 2010Bs, obviously have a little bit longer maturity. They mature all the way up to 2040. The refunding analysis that we presented here is, again, as of rates, is of early July. The market has continued to improve, so rates are actually better than what this table shows. But obviously, it gives you an idea where savings are. We typically use 2 measures of savings when we're looking at refinancings of debt. Present value savings, meaning obviously if you were to discount all those savings on future years of debt service to today's dollars, what does that translate to? As well as what is that on a percentage basis of the debt that you refunded. And you can see that, particularly to the 2010As, Bs, and to the 2014As, it's significant. You're enjoying over 25 to 30% savings on your 2010As and Bs, and now the 2014As are approaching 10% as well. So there are significant savings. Your 2014B bonds, those are not callable until 2024. So there are some inefficiencies in the escrow and the way the mechanics of our refunding work. At this point, we would not recommend proceeding with that refunding. It would also have to be done on a taxable basis as of today, because under current tax law that was passed in 2017 does not allow you to issue tax-exempt bonds to refund tax-exempt bonds prior to the call date, more than 3 months from the call date. So those, we're not recommending moving forward at this time with those, but we are obviously monitoring and keeping the authority informed of any opportunities that might come across if market conditions change. Next slide shows you a representation of what those savings mean, again, under rates from early July. And obviously, this is assuming the same current structure that the authority has in that debt. We are in conversations with Sarasota County and with other members on alternative structures of the debt. But obviously, we wanted to show you, at least on a base case scenario, what do these savings translate on an annual basis for each respective issuance of debt. So you can obviously, the graph below shows obviously where the debt service, the aggregate debt service of the authority is today versus what it would be under this scenario with refunding the existing 2010As, Bs, and 2014As as well. So it kind of gives you an idea as to, again, the savings that you would be able to incur on an annual basis. I will wrap it up by saying that from a timing perspective, we don't have a slide on this here, but we are looking to come back to the board for approval on the financing documents on September 30th. We're looking to price the bonds as quickly as possible after that, hopefully like the first or second week in October, and close mid to late October from a timing perspective. Obviously, we hope that the market cooperates with us and stays as firm as it has been over the last several weeks.
Very good. Thank you very much. Commissioner Mayo.
Yeah, Alex, you're going to have to bear with me. I know a lot of these answers, but I want to put them into the record. First of all, thank you for your cooperation in this. And I understand you were on the call, along with Ann and our staff, with the folks from Sarasota County. I made the motion in Sarasota County at our last meeting. We've just knocked down or built brand new or built new on new land, 6 firehouses. The 7th one, we just got a 1.63 all-in rate. I can't stress enough on behalf of this board, speaking just as one commissioner, I want my cake and eat it too, then I want cake again and eat it too, and then I want cake again and eat it. This is critically important. I understand there's a lot of work to be done, but I don't want to lose ground on this interest rate because we're going to discuss it again on September 30th. Is there something we could do today, or is there a vehicle to call for a special meeting? Because I don't want to see the rates start floating up. And I don't want to trade speed for accuracy either. I often get accused of that because I'm always in a hurry. But I know we're at historically low interest rates. The feds seem to be saying they're going to keep it at that. Or in your estimation, you're the one that does this for a living. Is there any possibility we will lose the great position that we would be in now if magically you could get all the paperwork done and the bond sold in the next hour and a half rather than on September 30th, just like those folks designing and building that reservoir, that it's not going to happen in another 2 or 3 weeks? What's your estimate on this? What can we do to completely, as much as possible, secure these low interest rates?
Well, I think, Commissioner, you said it very eloquently. I mean, the process of speeding up the documentation, the preparation of the documentation, the authority has not gone to the markets, to the capital markets, since 2015. So there is a process involved for all of our entities that have obviously gone through a capital markets transaction. Preparing the documents and moving forward. We're already in the process of doing that. We've already had those calls. You have bond counsel who's already working on the documents. You have disclosure counsel that's already working on the documents. Your own staffs from your members have received requests for updates to the utility systems of your respective entities to proceed as quickly as possible. So we understand that we need to get to the market as quickly as we can. But there is obviously a process in terms of that's going to take a little bit of time in terms of meeting with the rating agencies, preparing obviously the disclosure documents that are required. And I can tell you that the schedule that we have is very, very tight. And we are looking to price as quickly as we can. And at this point is early October, which is well ahead of the elections. We want to be ahead of the elections as well, because that's, I can't tell you where rates are going to be next week. I can't tell you where rates are going to be in a month. But obviously, we understand the urgency, and we are trying to move it as quickly as possible.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may continue for a little bit. And Alex, like I said earlier, I knew the answer, but that needs to get out there because you all and our staff are absolutely pursuing this as aggressively as possible. If there was going to be a sudden change, or you forecast a sudden change, and we could speed it up to secure that, I think you need to go through Mr. Lehman and ask us that. I mean, these are, I guess people can see it, but even just going to the page that doesn't have the 2014B, I mean, we're looking at a $20 million, over the life of the bonds, a $20 million interest savings. And yes, a lot of that, about $14 million of it, goes to bonds that Sarasota County is responsible for. But these are staggering numbers, and I want to compliment you and staff, our staff, and the staff you interacted with at the various counties just for shining a light on this and getting this done. This is a very big deal, especially when we're entering a world of spending $200 million on a third reservoir. This is 10% of that money. It's a staggering amount. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, appreciate your comments. Commissioner Race, anything to say?
Thank you.
I think it, again, in support of your request, sir, I would certainly agree to Mr. Lehman if there was any opportunity for a special meeting down the road, just to, again, to give you all direction. I understand you got it tight as it is, Alex, but just, again, if something happens where you think you can move it ahead a little bit quicker, I would be happy to attend a special meeting to try to get this resolved.
Perfect.
All set too, Commissioner? Got your direction, Mr. Lehman?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, Commissioners, that completes our regular agenda items. Like now to go to Mr. Manson on General Counsel's report. Do you have anything today, sir?
We have nothing for you today. No pending litigation, no issues.
Very good, sir.
Good day.
Thank you. Mr. Lehman.
Yes, this board's accomplished a lot over the last few years, as you've seen today with the master plan studies for both water supply, water quality, the initiatives you've taken with the budget and feasibility studies. The one missing component now is our strategic plan is like 5 years old, and a lot of the goals and issues in that, slap yourselves in the back. You've accomplished a lot of the time schedule within that, but it's time to dust it off and time for this board to take a look and look at the next 5 years and what are some of those goals and objectives. So I've suggested to the chairman at our next board meeting that the board take the opportunity and we walk through that strategic plan and give you the opportunity to provide the updates of the goals and objectives.
Workshop?
Yes.
Very good. Commissioners, you all set with having a workshop next meeting?
Yes.
Very good. Anything else, sir?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioners, the routine status reports, again, pretty standard. Pat, I did see some things on there, and you've invited me before, but on 5 and 6, the filter covers project, I think plants 1 and 2, it's done. Is that correct? Something like that in the filters?
Mr. Chair, board members, Mike Coates of your staff. Plant 1 is done. Plant 2 is expected to be done in the next couple of weeks, and then plants 3 and 4 are in process. But this should finish up well ahead of schedule. So if you want to come out and take a look at it, you maybe got a couple of months.
I've got some
construction activity.
Okay, I was just looking at some downtime this month, so, and you're also punching out the punch list items and substantial completion of the maintenance facility and warehouse, correct? Is that
Correct. That, in fact, our folks have moved in already.
I may come visiting. I'll give you a call, Mr. Lehman, and sometime this month, towards the end of the month. Thank you very much. Board member comments. Commissioner Mayo?
No, I just really want to thank our staff. I interacted with them an awful lot, and I hope that my intensity and impatience, especially in the case of Mr. Lehman and Ann, that I was never rude, because I was kind of insistent, but if I had been rude, I apologize publicly for that. But there's certain things we're doing that are just a tremendous, once-in-a-lifetime big deal for this authority.
I agree. Thank you, sir. Mr. Trace?
I'm fine, thank you.
Very good. I have nothing else to add. Just hope everybody, again, stays safe and stays well. Commissioners, we have one speaker card. Mr. Tim Ritchie would like to speak to us about Mosaic Bartow Chemical Plant NPDES permit. Mr. Ritchie, you have 3 minutes. Basically the same rules as when you visit us on the County Commission meeting. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioner Doherty and the board. My name is Tim Ritchie, and I am a resident of Punta Gorda Isles, Florida, and I am the founder of March Against Mosaic. Last time I saw everybody, we were up off of Kings Highway. I think that was January 31st of 2019. And again, I spoke to you all about the Mosaic Bartow chemical plant, NPDES permit renewal, which they'd submitted June 25th, 2018, but John Coates, I apologize, snuck this in on April 28th, 2020. I was very lucky to get a petition in 2 days before he signed the ticket. Now, I just withdrew my case voluntarily last Friday, and I went through a hell of a deposition with Super Attorney Gary Perko of Hopping Green and Sam's, where everybody in Charlotte, DeSoto, Manasota, and Sarasota County. What are we going to do about Mosaic fertilizer? Because next you're going to be seeing me talking about Mosaic DeSoto County beneficiation plant in 8 clay settling areas. You know, they changed my judge. They took the original judge and they put Judge Francine Folks on the case. The deck was so stacked against us. I listened to the meeting on the way up here. Where are the water tests? And I mean a hell of a deposition with Attorney Perko. Andy Maley said his deposition felt like a meat grinder. And then they tried to discredit Dr. Dezaka, a top graduate from MIT. In my deposition, this is what I kept talking to him about. Mosaic Plant City. They said it was closed. A few months later, it reopened as Anuvia Plant City. They're going to be trucking waste across county lines. I asked for Charlotte County's help. I begged you guys. Our watershed has chemical war going on. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right or the rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Okay, Commissioners, our next meeting will be September 30th, Wednesday, September 30th, 2020, Manatee County Administration Center in Bradenton. And a future meeting will be December 2nd at 9:30 in DeSoto County Turner Agri-Civic Center in Arcadia. Mr. Lehman, Mr. Manson, I don't believe we've got any other business. I think we've completed everything. As a result, this meeting is adjourned.